actively I can only actively view one tab at a time per row. But of course, clicking into each of these would show me that relevant information. The other big thing just to point out before we start actually doing a little bit of case management, adding some things to this record, is that these lists, so these various lists like the notes, the time slips, tasks, and events, they're going to show all of the relevant records for this case, regardless of who entered them. So if I were looking at, who's assigned to this case and it's just me, I was hoping I'd have another user on here to pick on, but we'll just pretend that Thomas is also working on this case and maybe I entered a couple case notes, Thomas did as well. We're both going to see all of those notes here. So keep that in mind when you're looking at a case, you're seeing the whole picture of the case, essentially, not just your work on that case. But we will see once we actually start to add some of these things in. I'll point out how you could, for instance, just go back to seeing only your time on this case or only your notes on this case, if you ever would find that helpful. So with that, I want to actually start doing a bit of case management here. And to do so, we're going to look up to our actions menu. And I am going to point out a couple of other ways that you'll be able to add things like notes. But for the most part, if you want to do something with a case or really with any record in LegalServer, you're going to want to look towards this actions menu. So if you ever get stuck and you're thinking, oh, I don't know how to do that in the system, 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be up in the actions menu. So always a good idea to check there for whatever you're looking for. And within this actions menu, we do have different menus on the left-hand side. So we can click through those, see the various links that are available under them. But I can also just utilize my keyword box at the top. So if I were looking for an option to copy this case, maybe, I can start to type in the word copy, and I see that option appear. So that will search through all of the different menus. So especially as you're starting to get used to the site, you might not want to have to remember where each of these links lives, even though they are grouped pretty obviously. But again, you can always use that keyword box at the top to find whatever you're looking for. So the first one we'll actually do together is add a case note. Pretty simple. Most users will probably be doing this pretty often in the system. So I'm going to click into add a case note. And it's going to launch me into what we call an auxiliary process. So these are all what we call auxiliary process in LegalServer. Basically just means we're going to add or edit information for a record, for a case here. So in this instance, of course, we are adding a case note. I can change the type if I want to. So it's going to default just to a general case note. But if I wanted to specifically say that this was something like a case accept note or any other note types that you all end up having in that list in your live site, you could specifically choose those. We can also set a subject that is optional. You'll notice no little red asterisk, so you don't have to put in a subject if you don't want to. But of course, the actual body is required, kind of the point of why we're here. And if you have what's called Rich Text Editor turned on in your user preferences, so if you remember user preferences from our very first call, if you go up to your user bubble here, click on My Preferences, one of the options is to turn on what's called Rich Text Editor. And that's going to give you all of these extra options at the top of our note box. So here I can do things like make some words bold, italicize, bullet points, some of those, again, extra formatting options. Scrolling down, I also have the option every time I enter a case note in LegalServer to email it to someone. If I want to email this to another user, so another person working on this case, for instance, I can start to type in their name, and they will pop up with whatever email address is in their user account. I can add multiple people here, so I could keep adding people, as many as I want to. And I can also just type in an email address. So if I actually want to send this to Thomas's Gmail address, or maybe I want to send this to the client or anyone outside of LegalServer who's not a user, I can just type in or copy paste their email address here as well. Also important to note is that this section will be appended to your email. So it does include a little bit of info and a link to the case. So obviously, if I were sending this to Thomas, he was working on this case with me, it'd be really handy to get this link in the email. You can just click it, get right to the case profile within Legal Server. But also important to note is that if you do send this to someone outside of your organization who does not have access to Legal Server, that link is not going to show them anything. If they click it, they'll be brought to your Legal Server login screen, and without a username and password, that's as far as they would get. And same thing applies even if you send this to someone who is a user who can log into Legal Server, but just shouldn't be able to access this particular case. Again, they would get that permission denied. They wouldn't actually be able to see the case profile just because you shared that link. So I'm going to delete this so I don't spam Thomas with that. I can also upload a document along with my case note. So here, if I have something relevant to my note, I can upload that just right in this same process. And you can also do multiple. If you click on upload and add another, it will give you another option to keep uploading them. And then lastly, I also have the opportunity to enter some time here. We're going to be getting into timekeeping a bit more a little bit later. But here you're able to enter a really short time slip attached to your case note. So, if this case note maybe was about an interview with the client, it was all of my notes from our interview, I might want to, enter my time I spent on that interview as I'm entering my note. So once I hit continue, I get right back to my case profile, and that's going to be the behavior for most of these links. So I say most because there might be one or two that will direct you somewhere else. Like for instance, sometimes depending on setup, if you enter a new event, it brings you to the calendar instead of bringing you back here to the case profile. But again, 9 times out of 10, once you complete one of these options, it's going to bring you right back to your case. So now that we're back on our case profile, I can scroll down a bit and I see my case notes tab. I see the note that we just entered. And I also see and can download the document that I attached to my note. And it also will show up, of course, in my regular folder structure below here. And then lastly, we also entered that time slip right with our case note. So again, I can see that here. And I can see any additional time that's already been placed on this case. This one was also by me back in January. And we can see the running total for that case. So also wanted to point out, as I mentioned a little bit before, that while the actions menu is going to be your main place for adding or editing a case record, you might have other options depending on what you're trying to add. So a good example of that is with case notes. So if we look at this case notes list, you'll notice that we have a little plus sign over here next to our filter buttons. And you'll notice that in some list views on your case profile. So not every single one, but some of them will have this little plus sign option, and that will launch you into adding that record. So this would launch me right into that exact same process we just used for adding a case note. So it's no different than if I would have gone to Actions, Add Case Note, exact same form, just another way to get there. So sometimes it's just personal preference. You might lean towards using one of those options over the other. Other times it just kind of depends on where you are in the system. So maybe if I were here looking at this list of case notes, I would find it more handy to just click there instead of having to go up to my Actions menu. So I'm going to go ahead and enter one more note just so I can show you a little bit about the filtering as well. But before I do that, I also want to mention one last way that you can add a case note to a case. And it's actually by emailing things to your case. So if you look up at our sidebar or our snapshot at the top here, you're going to see your case's email address. And every case has its own unique email address. It's always going to be the same format. So it's going to be your case ID at your site name. So when you have your live site, it will be the same, but minus that dash demo. So what will happen is if I send an email to this email address, and it works like a regular email, it could be the regular to, I can CC it on communications with someone, I can BCC it if I want to include it but not see the recipient, see the actual case's email address. And I could also even forward an entire string of emails to it. And what will happen is the actual email itself, so the body of the email, will come in as a case note right to your regular case notes list here. And if you attach anything to that email, those will come in as documents. And it will look similar to this, where you would see the attached documents within the note that's created, and then it would also add them to your folder structure. So that can be a really handy way to get notes and or documents into your case, especially when you're already, having that conversation by email, maybe with the client or opposing counsel or whoever that might be. And you think to yourself, hey, that would be handy information to have in LegalServer. Instead of having to copy and paste it into a note, again, you can just forward that to your case's email address. All right, so one last thing I wanted to also just mention while we're talking notes and documents before I move on talking a little bit about filtering these lists is just that we also do have document templates available. So it looks like we only have one example on your demo site, which is pretty common because they don't copy to live. But you might notice once you have your live site up and running that you have other templates available. And these are going to be your standard letters, memos, those types of documents that just need to fill in a little bit of case data to complete them. And when you download them from a case, that's exactly what they'll do. So your admins will set these up, tell the system where does data need to be filled into those documents. And again, once you download it from the case here, it's going to automatically fill that data in for you. So if you had something like an opening letter to the client that said, dear client name, when I download from this case, it will automatically fill in as dear test. And then just to mention, we also have that same concept, but for emails. We don't have any examples and demos, so I can't actually show you what it would look like, but basically same exact thing, but instead of generating a document, you're generating an email to send out. So again, kind of your standard types of emails you might send regularly to clients or other folks associated to a case. You can build those as templates and save you a little bit of time. All right, so wanted to circle back to talking a little bit again about how you can filter these different lists. So again, the case notes list, the time slip list, all of those are going to show you all of the notes or time slips for this case, which for our case is, not a big deal. We have 2 notes, not very hard to scroll through and look through. But if you have, an older case that's been working for a while and has, 42 different notes on it, you might want to be able to find a specific one or a specific set of them. So to do that, you can utilize your filters. And this is something common across most list views or any list of records that looks like this within LegalServer. So again, we can open up this filter option. We can see our different filters available and apply whichever ones we want to. So maybe I'm looking for just the notes entered during a certain time period, or just the notes with a certain subject line, just the notes created by a certain person. So I could type in myself here, for instance. Certain types of notes. So again, we saw how we could have just general notes or case acceptance notes, or timekeeping is what it's going to be if you enter a time slip with the note. So you'd be able to, again, come in here and filter based on that criteria. You can also filter on if it was updated when, if it was emailed to anyone or messaged to anyone, and also keywords of the actual body of the note itself as well. So again, that is just a way to kind of parse through your different lists of records like notes or time slips that are on a case. Another example would be our time slip list. And also things like tasks, events, which we don't have any on this case yet, but again, you'd see those same things with those lists. All right. right, so the next thing I actually want to move into talking a bit about as far as case management goes is assigning people to this case, or updating assignments, I should say. So the first thing I want to do is just head over to my People Organizations tab and just see who is currently associated to this case. And I see that obviously we have our client, and then we have me, legal server staff, as our primary assignment. And I can also see here that I'm the person who did the intake. Now, the intake assignment is special. It will automatically end itself once the intake is over. So if you're the person who did the intake, you're always going to see that here. But it's not a current assignment. It has an end date you'll see on the right here. And any assignment with an end date means it's no longer current. It's not going to be showing up on that person's homepage in their My Assignments list. It's just a historical record that this person, had something to do with this case. In this instance, that they did the intake. We then see I've got my primary assignment. As mentioned probably a couple times so far, you have to have one and only one primary. And then currently we don't have any additional assignments, but we could have as many of those as we want to. So again, same thing as with our notes. I could go up to Actions and find my link for Assign Case. But I could also, if I'm already at this list, come to my little plus sign and click that as well. So once I get to this assignment page, there are going to be two main things I can do here. Number one is transfer the primary assignment. So if I were to say legal server staff should no longer be the primary on this case, but I can't just delete that assignment because we have to have one. And I can't just add another one because we can only have one. So what I have to do is transfer that primary assignment to someone else. So if I click to transfer the case, I can update the assigned office and program if I want to. And then I would choose my new primary assignment. We'll pick on Demo Trainer here. I can write a note about this, and you're going to see this every time you make an assignment. So whether it's here to transfer our primary or to make some additional assignments like co-counsel or contract attorney or any of those additional assignments you have, you're going to have the option to write a note and email that note out. And same things apply here as we talked about when emailing case notes. Again, I can start to type in the user's name, they'll pop up, or I can just enter any email addresses I want to. And also same things apply with the link that will be sent as well. You do have another option here, and you'll see this in a couple different places throughout the site, is to send it also or instead as a message. That's just an internal messaging system within Legal Server. So this option can only be utilized for users, so people who are able to log into the system. So you cannot send this to someone outside of your organization, again, who doesn't have a Legal Server login. This is only going to search users in the system. All right, so once I set all of that, hit continue. Again, we get back to our case profile. If I click back to our People Organization tab, I can now see that Demo Trainer is our new primary. And I know that they are our new primary and not our additional primary because the original, again, automatically got that end date now. So once we transfer it, it ends that old one, transfers it over to the new one. If I pop back to that assignment page, the second piece was adding those additional assignments. So again, I can add as many additional assignments as I want to. So here I'm able to select the person I also want to assign to this case. So we'll pick on our fake contract attorney here. I would choose my type of assignment. So of course, I'm going to go ahead with contract attorney. And again, have that same option to write a note, send it off as an email and or a message. And I do see a question in the chat. Let me get that quickly. So the question is, are we all considered users in the system or is it office dependent? Great question. So everyone is a user in the system, but you are all assigned to an office, which will determine what you can see in the system, what types of cases you're able to access, those types of things. And it also does determine who you will see in these lists. So by default, these are just the other users in my office, which is probably why it's looking like a weird short list to you because of the office I'm assigned to. But I can click to see everyone regardless of office. So not sure if that would ever be something you'd all want to do. But again, by default, it's just your office. You can click to see more users. And I see another question. Are we able to run a report after primary transfers a case for assignment? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. If you mean a report that would show you that person was the primary, then the answer is absolutely. You will still have that history. You'll still know that person was the primary from this date to that date. If you're asking about being able to run a report that includes the case because you are no longer the primary, that's just going to depend on your permissions in the site and which reports you are able to run. So don't think I can answer that specifically without, an actual example. But I think the general answer is it will just depend on your permissions. All right, so let's finish out this assignment. I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. And again, back to our case, where I can see our new contract attorney assignment. And I see that they both, our two assignments now, our two current assignments, do not have an end date. So again, adding this contract attorney did not mess with our primary's end date. And I could, and we'll just do it really quickly, just to show you, add other people to this case as well. So let's say we have another contract attorney. I can add as many folks in as, whatever different assignment types that I need to. So again, now we have 3 active assignments. All 3 of these people are going to see this case on their homepage in their My Assignments tab. So last thing to really get to as far as assignments go is if you ever want to delete or end a current assignment. And again, this is going to depend on your permissions in the site. But if you do have permission to edit assignments, when I click to edit an assignment, like maybe our expert witness, I realize, whoops, they shouldn't have been assigned as a contract attorney. I can click that little pencil icon. You'll see that throughout the site as well, anytime you're able to edit things. And I would be able to either just edit something about it. So if I just chose the wrong assignment type, I can change it. Or I could also click to end the assignment. That is, of course, saying this assignment was correct. This person really did work on this case, but now they are done working on it. So I can just end that assignment, again, getting it off of their homepage and, having that end date added to the list. However, I do, again, depending on permissions, also have the option to actually delete the assignment. So if I realize, whoops, expert witness never worked on this case, they weren't supposed to work on this case, I just chose the wrong person, or I was on the wrong case profile accidentally, I can delete that assignment. And that, again, is deleting it entirely.
Lee, it looks like Mr. Ince has a related question there. I'll let you answer that.
Got it. Yeah. So the question is, if I have a conflict on a case I'm assigned, but have already put the client info in the system, can I transfer the data to another office that has reassigned the case since we're all in the same system, or can I only transfer it to someone in my office? So yes, you will be able to transfer it to another office. So if I go back, I'm just going to go ahead and just update that assignment. If I go back to that page where we were transferring our primary assignment, that's what's going to determine who can view the case is by the assigned office. So if you transfer the case to someone else and you say, whoops, we have a conflict, we cannot keep this case, but we think that the Douglas County Law Office, we're picking on you, you asked the question, I guess, we can transfer it to that office. And looks like we don't have any users associated to the office in the demo site, but it would show whoever is. I can choose that particular person and then transfer it over to that office. So yes, you will be able to do a transfer office to office if you need to for conflicts or any other reason. All right, and think I said everything I wanted to about, deleting versus editing. Again, deleting the assignment would actually just completely remove it from the system. It's like it never happened. So, you don't want to do that if you do want the record that that person was somehow associated to the case at all. All right, so a couple of other pieces of case management I wanted to also just touch on. So we talked just a little bit about, adding calendar records, how we can add them to cases, but just wanted to again point out you're going to have your calendar records available here. So you've got events, tasks, and deadlines. Any of those can be added to your case record. And let's say I add a task to this record. Maybe our task is that we need to call this client. One big thing to point out about tasks and deadlines is just their dates that they have. So the due date is exactly what you think it is. When should I have this done by? We'll say next Monday. But the list date is when should this start to show up in my task list? So if you want to build out some tasks for the future, things you're going to have to do with this case, but that you can't actually start working on yet until some other steps have been met or whatever that might be, you can set that list date out to whenever you do want it to start showing up. And then on that day, it will start appearing on your task list. So again, just a good way to build things out for the future without having to create this big, long list of tasks for you to look at that you can't actually start working on yet. We can then choose our task type. We could enter some notes about it, email those, or send them as a message. You can also mark it private so other users don't see your details. Add anyone else here who you want this on their task list. So anyone in the system, you can add it to their task list as well, and even remove yourself if you don't want it on yours. And then we would select our office and program. We can add a reminder as well. And you're going to see this reminder block on all of the calendar records. So events, tasks, and deadlines. So really flexible. When do you want to send this reminder? What should the reminder be? You can also utilize templates. We don't have any real ones set in your demo site, but again, something that you might see in your live site. And then on the right, I get to decide who to send this reminder to. And this is going to show me pretty much everybody associated to the case so far. So I see all of our assignments that we made on the case. I see the client. I see myself, who is an attendee, and also Thomas, who I added as an attendee as well. So anyone associated to the case or to this task. I can then choose how do I want to send this to people. So by email, message, or SMS if I have a SMS mobile phone number for them. So I can text reminders as well. I'm going to remove this again so I don't spam anybody. Hit continue. And it's going to bring me right back to my case where I can see that task here. And Thomas and I will also see this task on the home page on our task list there as well. Oh, and just kidding, because we don't have our task list on the home page, so apologies. But if I headed over to my calendar, I'd be able to see it on my task list there as well. But otherwise, I've got it on my case profile. And again, anyone who can see this case, work on this case, will be able to see all of those tasks and who they are assigned to. All right, so another one to mention as far as case management goes that you might be updating throughout the life of the case is going to be your case status. So if I look back to my snapshot at the top here, one of the options up here as well is status. And this particular case has not had a status set yet, but usually something that gets set at the end of your intake process and then can get updated along the way throughout the life of the case. And this will keep a history for you. So you'll see the list you at the top will show you any of the case status values that have been chosen. And then I'm able to select my new status. So let's say that maybe we are putting this to set for review, and I can associate a due date if it makes sense. So maybe we're saying we want to review this by July 1st. And then again, I can write some notes about it, email those off, or send them as a message. Hit continue. And we're back to our case profile where I can see that updated status. So now I can see that status reset. And again, to update it again, just click it. You'll see that history and be able to update it whenever you need to. All right, so last thing just for our general case management, and then we'll get into some more detailed information about timekeeping and activities as well. But last thing I want to do here just for our general case management is talk a little bit about, or actually, sorry, I'm going to talk a little bit about closing and reopening. Before I do that, one last thing I just want to mention generally here is that you do have quite a few options for editing your case information. So if there's anything you need to edit after intake, or maybe that wasn't collected because it wasn't required at intake, but now you have that information, you're going to have these edit options available here in your actions menu. So you've got a whole section called edit case info, edit contact info, demographics, family member information, financial, etc. And these should, if not in demo, but in live, mirror essentially their entry forms. So whatever you're entering for demographic information on your intake, you should see those same options here on your case profile. And then same goes with, any of these sections. The other big one to point out is additional names for client. That's a way that you can trigger the conflict check whenever you want to. So if you ever need to do a conflict check after intake, again, go to the case, go up to actions, edit case info, and click on additional names for client. As the name suggests, this is obviously a way to add additional names for your client. So if you find out they have an alias or a maiden name you want to put into the system, this is where you can do that. But again, it's also just a way to generate that conflict check. So this is the same conflict check that you're doing during intake, assuming you're doing one, where it's going to show you anyone in the system who's a possible match for your client here, based on name, date of birth, social, phone numbers as well. And you'll see that score. Why did that person appear? You can click into those full case profiles to see more. And you can also just use this to associate your case with an existing client. So if you were talking to this person and they said, hey, yeah, you're also helping me with another case, you'd be able to, run this and then associate those two, just tagging that it's the same person. And then scrolling down here is where you'd be able to add those additional names. So if you have, again, an alias, former, or maiden name, you can add that and search on it as well. And then once I do my conflict check, I can tag that, which gets rid of that conflict check warning in my top snapshot. I don't know if you noticed that, but I had a little red bar saying, hey, you didn't tell us if we had conflicts or not. So of course, setting that will also get rid of that there. All right, so now I think I'm ready to launch into talking a little bit about closing and reopening. So back to our actions menu, we've got our close case. And it does look like we've got different closing processes for civil and criminal. So of course, this being a civil case, that's the option we see. So really simple. We've got our close reason that we'll choose. Again, keep in mind this list might be a little bit different in your live site. We've got our date closed and we have our handy date picker. We can use that or just manually type it in. Our case status, this is going to show just the last case status we selected. So we just updated ours to working, but at this point I could go ahead and set it to closed. We've got our file destroy date, and this defaults to 7 years in the future. Really important to note is that this has nothing to do with the electronic file. So some users think that, on this day in 2028, the legal server file is going to spontaneously combust and disappear from the system. That will not happen, I promise. What this is really for is so that you all or admins can run a report and say, hey, which physical files should we be destroying this year or this quarter or whatever your process is for that. Scrolling down, we do have also the option here to write a note on our closing form. And again, send it off as an email if we need to share that information with anyone like our supervisor or anyone working on the case with us, etc. Lastly, it's going to tag me, the logged in user, as the person closing the case. And it's going to let me know that a closing number will be automatically assigned. And the closing number is really similar to how your case IDs are assigned. It's going to start with the year. So anything closed this year will have 21 dash, and then it goes just numerically from there. So the first case we closed this year in your demo site would have been 21-1. And we'll see how many we've closed based on the closing number of this one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, hit continue. We've officially closed our case. You'll notice that little section of our snapshot turned red. And we also have this new section of closing information. So who closed my case? When did they close it? What was the reason? And what was that closing number? So this is the 35th one we've closed in your demo site this year. So one thing to point out is that once you close your case in LegalServer, you can still view it. So we're still viewing it with the same profile. We're still seeing the same information about it. But the options that you have now might be a little bit more limited. So for instance, I'm not able to assign more people to a closed case. I'm also obviously not able to close a closed case. So I don't see either of those options available anymore in my assign, close, refer section, and they were there just a minute ago when this case was open. So just keep that in mind that your options for a closed case are going to be more limited than they were for an open case. And same could be said for pending. If you ever leave any of your cases pending in the system, again, you might not have all of the options that you would see once you accept and open up that record. So now that we have, again, our closed case, the other thing to talk a little bit about is the fact that you can functionally reopen cases in LegalServer. Now, of course, if and when you would do this is subject to any of, your own program rules. So a lot of programs, of course, have, different time periods where, hey, if it's only been closed for less than a month and it's the same legal issue, you can reopen it or, whatever that criteria might be. So keep that in mind. But functionally in LegalServer, I can reopen any closed case. So if I close this case today and then the client calls back and says, hey, I just got this thing in the mail, this letter, this notice of something. And so you realize we're not really done with this case. I've got to open it back up again to work on it some more. So what you'll do is go up to actions, back to your assign, close, refer, where you'll see that reopen option. And for any of you who have done an intake in LegalServer, this is going to look very similar to the last page of your intake as far as, we're setting the disposition back to open, our date opened. We have it set up so that it defaults to the original date opened, but if you need to change that, you can. Office and program will default back to what they were pre-closing, and our caseworker will choose our new primary assignment. It can still be the same person that it was already. So if we look here, demo trainers are currently primary. So I could set it right back to demo trainer, or I could choose someone new if that made sense. We've also got our funding code. Again, it's just going to default to what it was before. We have our option to write a note about this, and of course, to send it off as an email. And lastly, I have my case status, so that I can change this from closed to another, open related status again. So obviously when I'm reopening it, I don't want the status to say it's closed. So I'm able to come here and update that as well. Once I hit continue, we of course get right back to our case profile. Now we see our case is back to being open. And I have all of the same options that I did originally with my open case. So you see my list is quite a bit longer. I have my options to assign again, to close my case again. which I'll be able to do whenever I want to, and all of my edit options, etc. So back to having all of those same options that I did for my closed case originally. The other big thing, though, to point out about reopening cases in LegalServer is that anytime you ever do this, it will automatically create a case note with some of that reopening information. And this is going to happen no matter what type of user which type of user reopens the case. And also, no user can delete this note. So even your admins, even us on support, you'll notice I do not have the option to edit or delete this special note. So reopen notes are special, they get created automatically, and we can't change or delete them. What they will tell you is who reopened the case, when it was previously closed by who, and the original close reason and closing number. So you'll always have that information on your case. You'll know it was reopened, and you'll have some of those details. But otherwise, as I mentioned, this is really just like any other open case in our system at this point, and we can continue to work on it however long we need to. And whenever we're ready to close again, we would just go back to Actions, Close Case, and we'd be able to fill out this close page again. And set it back to closed. All right, so that is everything for just a general case management overview. And we're going to start to get into some of those more specific details of timekeeping and activities. I'm actually going to start with activities since we're already on our case here. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I just wanted to pause. I don't see any outstanding questions in the chat, but if anyone has questions from what we've talked about so far, let me know. And at this point too, you can feel free to unmute if you prefer, or type it into the Zoom chat screen, and I'll wait just another minute here to see if any of those questions come in before we go ahead and move on. All right, well, we will go ahead and keep moving. If you're still typing and I was just a little too quick for you, please continue to do so, and we will circle back to those. But the next thing I want to talk a bit about is just activities on cases. So we've got a tool that we call activities, and it's going to allow you to record several different things for your cases. So on our case profile, we've got our activity log. Of course, we don't have any activities on this case yet, but any activities, again, that any user has added to this case, we'll be able to view here. And also same thing, if I go up to actions, oh, this is a closed case. I was going to say I should see the activity option. So let me just head over to a case that is still open. There we go. So, so we're actually on our criminal profile. So note that it might look a little bit different from the case that we were currently, or previously rather, working on. We'll see if this one has any activities. No activities yet. But you'll notice we've got a little bit of extra information for this criminal profile. So what I was going to say is next thing is with activities is, again, we can go up to actions, add activity. We can also just click the little plus sign from the list if we're already here. So both of those are going to launch me into the same process for adding an activity to a case. So what we want to do first is, well, we can adjust the date if we need to. It's going to default to today. But if we really should have entered this activity yesterday and we forgot, we can adjust that. The user, again, is going to default to you as well. And then we have our activity. So what am I trying to record for this case? That's really what activities do. They allow you to record that you've done different things with your case, and those things will also be reportable. So we have two different types of activities. We have ones that are tagged as in court and ones that are tagged as out of court. So which one of these you choose will determine the list of items that you will have available. So if I choose that we're having an in-court activity, these are my different various items. So things that would be happening in court. If I go back and say that my activity is an out-of-court activity, I would see activities that are related to things I would be doing outside of court. And again, these lists might not be perfect at this point, but they should be a relative kind of representation of the types of activities you might see available. Another thing to mention, and I don't think any of these were active on your demo site at the moment, but you might also have some things automatically appear based on the activity and item that you've chosen. So what I mean by that is that we also have a tool called Activity Presets, and that allows your admins to put in some logic into the system and say, well, if someone says that they have an in-court activity and that in-court activity is a jury trial, we might want to create some tasks for the user to prep for the trial or schedule something for the trial witnesses or whatever that activity might be related to, to this activity. So again, this will just all depend on what your admins decide to set up in your live site, but you might see things like tasks, events, deadlines, or even outcomes appear on this page to enter, again, based on the activity that you've selected. So once I choose the activity I want to enter here, I can choose to also attach some documents. So if I have some documents relevant, if my activity was that I drafted a motion, for instance, I can upload that motion here. And I can also associate time with the activity as well. So again, let's say that I, drafted something and I spent an hour doing it. I can put all of that in with this one process. Scrolling down, I can also write a note about it and email that note off. This list would just show me any activities currently on the case. This is the same exact list as we have on that case profile. And when I hit continue, I get back to my case, of course. I can head to my activity log and see that activity that we've entered. We also, of course, added some time, so I see that here too. And we added a document, which will show up in my regular document folder structure. So that is activities. Again, we'll just click back in there, do one more. This time we'll say we have an out of court activity. We're drafting some pleadings. And again, can attach the pleading, can attach some time if I want to, see other activities that have been done on this case and who did them, and then add that activity to my case and view it right there on the case profile as well. And as I mentioned, if you're adding activities in this way, they are also reportable. So this is going to allow you to run those types of reports, say, hey, how many other pleadings did we draft for cases last month, or whatever those various activities. It's probably one that wouldn't be as likely to be wanted to be report on, but maybe how many hearings did we do last month, or different things like that. So that is activities on cases. Pretty simple to use, but can be really handy. And as I mentioned, as your admins work in some of those presets and things they might decide to use, can be, really great tool, can get you some really great data onto your cases. So now I want to jump into timekeeping. So timekeeping in LegalServer, one thing to mention is that we can have time associated to cases, but we can also have time that's not associated to cases and is just associated to a user. So if I, for instance, go to my main timekeeping page and I go up to my actions menu, You're probably thinking this is where I could add some time slips, and you would be right. And you're going to see your different types of time slips available here. So you can see that we have a case time slip and one called other time. And that would be the type of time that, again, is associated to a user, but not a specific case. So if you need to record something like leave time or admin time, maybe spent building or running reports in the system, or whatever you're able to, record time for that's not directly associated to one particular case, you can do that here. So those are your 2 time slips currently. I say currently because, again, your admins might decide to expand that, adding different types of time slips, but they're always going to be kind of in those 2 main buckets of either case time or non-case time. So the only place that I can add other time or non-case time is from this actions menu or from our timer, which we'll wait a minute to talk about, but that will be another option. But really the main way to add other time is to come to your timekeeping page, go up to actions, add other time. Pretty simple time slip. Some of these extra instructions will probably be gone in your live site, but really all I have to do is choose my activity type, my funding code, my time spent, of course. I can put in some activity details if I want to. So maybe this is time building reports. And I also have the option of entering miles and expenses. Once I hit continue, I get right back to my main timekeeping page, and I would be able to see any of the time I've entered so far. So that is, again, our other time slip, not associated to a case. If I want to add time to a case, usually I would be on the case profile, going up to actions, add time, and just do it from there. You can also go up to actions here and click on add case time. The downside, if you will, is that it, of course, does not know what case I want to add this time for, because I just started from my main timekeeping page. I can still, of course, associate it with a case. So the 2 options are to search for my case. So I can search based on client name or case ID. Or if you look on the left-hand side here, this is going to show me any of my recently accessed cases. So cases I've recently clicked on and looked at. So I can select one of those, have that fill in for me, and be adding time to that case. So pretty simple again. I have on this time slip, it does allow me to either enter the time spent manually or enter my start and stop times. So I could say that I started this activity at 10:02 and ended at 11:23, and that would calculate the time spent for me. Same thing, I have miles driven, other expenses. I can enter a case note, since this time the time slip's associated to a case, and can also email that note out. I have 2 buttons on this one, regular, continue, or save and add more time for this case. If I click that, it just saves the time, reloads the time slip, so I can enter another one for this same case. So it saves you a little bit of time, a little bit of clicking. So because, again, I started from the main timekeeping page, it doesn't bring me to the case automatically. It brings me to the time slips profile. So I can just see the details about the time slip I just created. But it also has a link at the top to the case profile. So I can go there, view the case, and of course, all of the time associated to it. So I wanted to head back to our main timekeeping page as well, or actually, sorry, since we were on the case, might as well also go up to actions, add time. Again, going to be really the exact same time slip. Only difference is that it knows which case we want, so that's linked at the top automatically. And again, just fill out the rest, hit continue, click back to our case, and see our new time slip. So now I want to head back to our main timekeeping page and talk a little bit about that. So your first tab is your timekeeping log. So this is just going to show you your time this month sectioned out by day. So we can see I entered a little bit of time on the 15th. And then most of my time for this month, of course, has been today. So if the time is associated to a case, I would see that case and it's linked here as well. So again, I can click right into these cases. If I don't see anything linked, that means it's non-case time. We also have a tab over called My Open Cases. And this is just going to show me all of the cases I'm assigned to that are currently open. So almost the same list as your My Assignments on your homepage, but this time only showing you open cases you're currently assigned to, instead of, I believe, the other one's open and pending. So the reason this is on your timekeeping page is that LegalServer is assuming that your cases you're assigned to that are open are the ones you're likely to probably want to add some time to. And I believe this pro bono time will be hidden in your live site, so I'm going to ignore that. But we would have our link to add time for any of these cases, open cases we're assigned to. So again, assuming these are ones I might want to add time to, I can just really quickly click that link, enter the time, and see it, of course, on my timekeeping log. And then lastly, our final tab here is just recently viewed cases or matters. So this time there's no disposition filter, so cases or matters. And I don't have to be assigned to these cases either. I might be assigned to some of them, but it doesn't matter. Just as long as, again, I've recently looked at it, you'll see I've got my access date. So when did I look at these cases? And again, we'd have our add staff time link. So I can go ahead and just add time really quickly to that record. So another thing I wanted to point out is I'm going to head back to our home page. Speaking of your My Assignments list, this will also have a quick option for adding time and recording activities as well. So if you were on your homepage looking at, hey, which cases do I have still assigned to me today? You could really easily add those activities or those time slips right from that homepage. And I'm hoping you're seeing the pop-up. I think you're able to see it through Zoom, but always a little bit tricky with pop-ups. But it gives me a pop-up to enter the time slip or the activity. And of course, it's already connected to that specific case that I've indicated. So again, could be a quick way to do that. And I see a question in the chat, is the pro bono designation, does that have any meaning for us? Thomas, feel free to jump in. I don't believe it does. I think that is just a leftover in your demo site that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. I don't think we're using any of those different pro bono attorney related tools for your site.
No, the short answer is no, it's not really relevant. And I know that we addressed that. I don't know if it couldn't be taken out or what the story is. Stan, are you on? Can you answer that question about why the pro bono thing designation is still in there?
I think it was originally because when we had several attorneys working on the same case or attorneys working the case at a different offices.
No, that wouldn't be it. I can answer that question, but I mean, we can answer that question in more detail later. I'll ask Michael, but for now, no, that's not really relevant. So don't worry about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so another way that you will be able to enter time is by utilizing the timer. So the timer is totally optional. You might decide that you love it and you use it all the time to enter all of your time, or you might decide that you're not a big fan and you like to just record the time you're spending on your phone, on your clock, or just by writing it down or however it works best for you. But you do have this built-in timer available. So if we hover over the timer, you can see I can start a non-client timer, so that non-case time. I'm also going to see my recent cases here. So this is a case we were just on, the Michael Smith case. I can click to start that timer. And you'll now see that it's up here, it's running. Now, the thing that's a little bit tricky is that it says running, but it shows me all zeros and it's not changing. So a lot of times people are expecting that to be minutes and seconds, but it's actually going to just show you hours and minutes. So that's the reason you're not going to see anything but zeros until you've let your timer run for at least a minute. But as long as you see that word running, you should be good to go. Your timer should be actively running. And speaking of actively running, you can only have one timer actively running at a time. You can have multiple timers running, but only one would be running, the others would be paused. So I could pause this timer. Let's say I'm talking to Michael, I'm interviewing him, I'm writing some notes, and he gets another call from work and says, hey, I'm gonna have to call you back. I have to take this. I could pause that timer. I could then move on to my next activity, start the timer for that, work on that activity until Michael calls me back. And then when he does, I pause that other timer, I restart this one, and I continue talking to Michael until I'm done. What would happen in that instance is the time spent that gets calculated by the timer would just deduct the amount of time it was paused. So it would say if I ran from 10 to 10:15, then I was paused until 11 and ran from 11 to 11:15, that time spent total would be a half hour. So it's smart enough to know how long it was actually actively running for so that you can utilize that option of pausing it, restarting it, as much as you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our timer now that we've gotten past a minute there. And again, it's the same exact time slip. The only difference is that it's going to have your start and stop time filled out for you and calculate that time spent automatically. And your site is set to tenths. So of course, I didn't actually let it run for long enough to capture at least a tenth of time. But if I were to cheat and set this back a little bit, you'll see it would calculate it based on that start and stop time. All right, I also wanted to head back to our timekeeping tab. You might have noticed in our actions menu here that along with our two types of time slips, we also have a couple of links to time-based reports in the system. And again, caveat that this will be based on your permissions, whether or not you're able to view and run these reports. But I suspect that most of you probably are going to be able to. And again, these are going to be some time-based reports that are specific to you. So how it says my time, that means you as the logged in user. So these are some handy reports if you want to see just your time today, for instance. Maybe you want to see, how much time have I entered for the day, or where was I spending my time today? You can run this report. You'll see the very bottom of the time spent column is your total for the whole day. And of course, you'll see what time slips have made up that total. If you're wondering about your time today, another really handy thing is at the very top of LegalServer, next to your user bubble, is this My Time bubble. And that is going to, again, just show you the hours you've entered so far today. So, of course, there are a couple of other reports available there too. So my time by month, my time last month, my time this month, that's going to be the same as your timekeeping log that we're looking at here. So you'll notice at the top of it, it actually says run my time this month. So this is what we call an embedded report. And I think you've heard that term before. Basically just means we're viewing the report right here. But again, I can click here or from my actions menu, run the report as a report. So I'm able to, use it as a report, adjust the filters if I want to see my time for 2 months or for 2 weeks or something like that. But those are some handy ways where you can keep track of the time that you're entering into the system. And I believe that should really be everything I wanted to make sure to point out as far as timekeeping goes. So we have covered our main kind of topics for today. So case management generally, including doing some of those case management tasks together. We also talked through your activities tool, how that can be utilized, and then of course, timekeeping as well. We have plenty of extra time for our training here. So if anyone has questions or requests to see something again, please can we enter a case note again or whatever that might be, that would be helpful to see. Please let me know. Again, feel free to use the chat box or feel free to unmute at this point as well. So I see a question, which is, if I have a client with multiple cases that are heard at the same time, so misdemeanor and felony cases, both heard at the same hearing, discussed in the same client interview, etc., how can I split that? I don't have to double enter it in both cases separately, do I? So again, I'll let admins talk on that if they want to at all, because some of that, of course, comes down to your program decisions and how you do things in the site. But generally, what I'll say is that if you need 2 cases for the same client, you only really have to do the intake once, and then you're going to be able to copy that case. So if I were going back to Michael Smith's case here, and I was talking to Michael, and this was his felony case. So I see it's a felony case here. And, we're also working on a misdemeanor issue. I can go up to actions to my case copy, and I can copy to a new civil or criminal case for this client. I can also do a quick case copy. That one's a little bit different. That is going to copy more information, but it's going to let you make fewer changes. So these other 2 will have you walk through those intakes, either the civil intake or the criminal intake, or I think they're called indigent or non-indigent defense intakes. Whereas the quick case copy will just let you choose a new problem area, and that's it. Pretty much everything else will copy for you. So that is how you can create a new case record tied to your same client. Keeping in mind those would then be 2 separate cases. They would be associated. So if you were to, for instance, click on your client's name and go to your client profile, you'd see both of those cases now listed here. So again, they'd be associated to the same person, but they would be separate cases. So if you do something like add a time slip on one of them, it's not going to add it to the other case. So just keep that in mind. That might be seen as a negative or a positive, depending on circumstances. But again, they would then both be associated to that same person. And I don't know if on our profile, if we have, yep, so I don't see associated cases right on the profile, but if that was something you'd want to be able to see here, you could add that list to your case profile as well to say, hey, show me other cases associated to this person. Otherwise, again, all I have to do is click on their name, get to their client profile, and then I'd see any cases that I have in the system for that person. And yes, if you do, so the question in the chat now is, so I would have to enter 2 separate time slips. Again, really just kind of depends on what you want your data to be in the system and what your procedures and rules are around this type of thing. If you enter it just on one case, it's just going to live on that case. But you would see all of the time for all of the cases for that person on their client profile. So if you just did the activity once, you would record it on the one case, and you'd see that it was done for that person. It would just be associated to the one case, if that makes sense.
So yeah, I mean, for our purposes, the main thing is to have an idea of how much time people are spending on the cases so that we can make an assessment in the weighted caseload study and otherwise about whether additional resources are needed, additional attorneys are needed. If anybody is overloaded or something of that nature. The main concern is making sure there are enough attorneys, enough resources for every county. So we just want to make sure, again, in general, that the time is captured. We're probably not going to micromanage how you put that in. If you were in a hearing for an hour and it was 2 cases, you could either just put it all in one case, or you could say half an hour here, half an hour there. Again, we're probably not going to micromanage it to that extent. We want it to be as accurate as possible, but we also understand that something like that is really hard to parse out. So we would probably leave that up to you. Again, as long as the time were accounted for.
But then you're not getting an accurate read of what time is being spent on what kinds of cases. If I put it all on the felony case, because that's the higher charge, then it looks like I'm doing no work on the misdemeanor case, and you don't have any decent data to be able to make any objective calls on what you're going to do with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, Matt, it's one way or another. Like I said, we would like the data to be as accurate as possible. So if you can parse out, how much time you spent on each thing, then that would be our preference, right? But the way you phrased that question was, I'm just in the same hearing on these 2 different things, and how do I do that? I was just giving you a hypothetical. You could split it, or if you think, the more accurate representation is 40 minutes on the felony and 20 on the misdemeanor, then split it up that way. Again, we understand that some of these, it's hard to have an exact count on how much you spent where. We would rather have an accurate picture as much as possible. But some of that's going to be up to you. We can't come up with bright line rules for every single situation like that. So you're going to have to parse that out in a way that you think is fair and equitable, and create some sort of, as accurate a record as possible.
I'm just asking, I think, if there's a way to be able to split a time entry between 2 separate matters then.
Well, you'll have to enter the time in each case according to what you think an accurate representation is.
Okay, so the software doesn't allow that. We have to do that on our own and then make a separate second entry for the exact same thing. And there's no way to copy that over.
Well, again, it's not the exact same thing, but I'll let Leah field whether there's some technical trick there that I don't know or not. I mean, again, if it were the exact same thing, then it wouldn't matter where you put it. But the truth is that you're doing work in each case in some way. If you negotiate, a deal that's global for both cases, you've done some work in each case, right? Sorry, Leah, go ahead, please.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I was just going to say there's not a mechanism to, have a time slip split between 2 cases or something like that. They are, one time slip is for one case. What might be a little bit handy is if I'm entering it on the first case for Michael Smith here, his felony case, let's say, and I enter, or we'll say we spent an hour, but I'm going to split it between his 2 cases. So half hour for this one. If I click save and add more time for this case, it's going to automatically have that same case here, but I could start to type in his name, choose his other case. Obviously he doesn't have another one in the system, but choose his misdemeanor case and then, enter the 0.5 again. So not exactly, what you were hoping for, but could save you a little bit of clicking.
And, Derek has sort of a related case. In my opinion, if you've got if you've got a felony case and a misdemeanor case, and I understand this is a common thing where you trail the misdemeanor, they should have separate case numbers, which would be separate cases in the system. One's the misdemeanor case, one's the felony case. They're in different courts with different case numbers. So those would be, and you know, oftentimes the misdemeanor goes away or whatever when you resolve the felony case. But again, the way I see this, those would be two different cases by necessity. That answer that, Derek?
It does, Tom. I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. So I think that catches everything outstanding from the chat. So we're open to any new questions or requests.
Doesn't look like anything else in there. If someone is still typing, we'll give you a few more minutes, but I just wanted to say that Tuesday's recording and today's, once we process them, there'll be a link on our website with the other ones to our YouTube page. I'm having Cindy create a playlist specifically for that. You know, just give us a day or two to finish that up and have those up. And then I am going to send out an email to try to get a head count for the next 2 weeks on the advanced trainings. So if you're planning on doing that, and you could pick a date and let me know or respond to the email when I send it out, that'll be great. Again, I appreciate everyone taking time out of their schedules. I know you're busy. The software is going to be valuable, and both for your offices, and hopefully it makes it easier for everyone to do the reporting that we have to do under the Davis requirements. Leah, thank you again for your skilled presentation here today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.